Welcome back to the Late Nye Show. I'm your host, Amber Nye. If you missed last week's episode, I had the wonderful field hockey captains Lily Hatfield and Evie Schneider. This week, I have a teacher here at DS, Miss Milad. She's been teaching for over 20 years, and she teaches both sophomore world history and also an elective history course called Facing History. And now I'd like to welcome Miss Milad onto the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amber.
One of the classes that you take you teach is Facing History. How did that class kind of come into fruition? Did you create the class at DS or?
No, I was actually incredibly lucky. I had been teaching at DS for just 3 years, and it was formerly taught by and brought into the school by a wonderful teacher and a man by the name of Mr. Morrison. And he had actually mentored me in my first year of teaching. And when he retired, the course was just sort of available. And I was incredibly lucky as ending my third year of teaching to be able to then take over that class. And as students may know if they've taken the course, the Facing History in Ourselves, the name comes from an organization that's based in Brookline, Massachusetts, and they have over the years developed all of these wonderful curriculum materials. But DS is really unique, I think, in the sense that we have a full year elective course that is dedicated to both the content that Facing History involves, but also the philosophy behind the course. Because I know a lot of teachers who are familiar with Facing History. They might teach a unit here or there. They may have taken a course with the organization, so they're familiar with the philosophy. But I don't know of anyone or anywhere that has a full year course like we do. So it was just luck, and here I am still teaching it 20 years later.
Why did you decide to go back to DS as a teacher? What was that journey like for you?
Well, I'm not sure there was a certain point when I decided to go back to DS, but I'd studied history in college, and then I always liked learning. And so my first real job beyond like temp agencies was working in publishing for a textbook publishing company. And that was a great job, but I ultimately didn't want to stay there and keep doing that. So I just thought, well, what does someone with a history major, a degree in history do? So I went back to school to become a high school history teacher. And again, just sort of luck. I was looking for jobs and a position at DS was open. It was really funny. I remember I was interviewed. One of the people on the interview committee was my former world history teacher.
Wow.
And one of my former, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Goldsmith.
Wow.
And I remember when I had Mrs. Goldsmith, she had gone to China that year, and that was pretty unusual. In the 1980s, have a teacher take a year off and travel to China. So it all just kind of came full circle.
Yeah, definitely full circle.
But not through any planning. It's just sometimes things fall into place.
And that's so wonderful about like life and things like that.
Yeah.
You might have the longest commute out of anyone at DS. How do you spend your time in the car, and what's your favorite podcast that you listen to?
Oh, yes. So I am a real NPR junkie. I listen to NPR. I turn it on when I get there in the morning, when I step into the car. But I do also listen to a number of podcasts. Well, before I talk about a few of my favorite podcasts, I will also say that I joke, because people always feel badly for me when they hear how far I commute. And I don't like people feeling sorry for me. So my answer is always like, oh, no, it's not so bad. And it's true. It's the only time in my day where I am by myself.
It's very nice. How long is it again?
It's like an hour and 20 minutes if I don't hit traffic. And traffic has been bad, So sometimes it's longer.
Yeah.
So I like to look at it as me time. One of my favorite, it used to be when school used to get out an hour or so earlier. And it always used to be that Fresh Air, Terry Gross. Have you ever heard that show?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you should definitely check out that podcast. Since you're interested in interviewing people. Yeah, Terry Gross. She has an NPR program out of WHYY in Philadelphia called Fresh Air. And she interviews, all sorts of like wonderful, prominent luminary types from actors,
Wow.
scholars, politicians, and she interviews all these really amazing people in various fields, but she has the most kind of down to earth, honest conversations with them. So for me, I really like that because, just listening to the news constantly can get wearing.
Yeah.
So these are really just sort of nice human conversations also about real topics. So for example, she interviewed just the other day, like a Palestinian poet, and the week before she had interviewed an Israeli author. So just really human perspectives on things. So anyway, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
but you
really
can move on
nice.
to the next question because I'll talk too much.
Do you have a memorable or funny moment from your years in the classroom?
Many, probably.
Yeah.
One of the funniest ones, and actually this is funny. So I have horses, as some people might know. And before I had my own children, my horse had a baby. So this was a very exciting year for me, and I shared with my students at some point that my horse was expecting. And this was right before smartphones.
Okay.
And I was teaching in the room that Mr. Grady used to be in, and now Miss Swinson's in. So it's that inner room. And we didn't have smartphones. So I remember the phone rang, and it was the front office saying, your brother's on the phone. And my brother used to swing by the farm and just sort of check on things. He's 10 years younger than I am. This was back in 2008. So this was right before everyone got smartphones. So I was like, okay. And I stepped into the room, and I found out that my poor pregnant horse was having this issue. And so I ran back into the room, and I was like, she put the call through. So I said to the kids, I'm sorry, I have to go. My horse is cast, which of course to a non-horse person means nothing. Yeah. Also, spoiler alert, everything was fine. But I ran out of the room, which you're not supposed to do. And then when I came back, it was really sweet. The students had gotten up because, like I said, no one had cell phones. They had sat themselves behind my computer, which was like a desktop. And I must have still been logged in. And they were trying to figure out what cast meant. And so they had Googled it. And by the time I came back, they had figured out what being cast was meant and what the solution was. And it was very memorable to me. Anyways, and what cast means is horses sometimes turn themselves in a way where if they're up against a wall, they can't get their feet under themselves to get up. It sounds kind of strange. So, and because she was pregnant and large, she had gotten herself stuck against the wall and was stuck and couldn't get up.
Right. Okay.
And anyways, my students found me a solution for that. So that just sticks out for some reason. It has nothing to do with the subject that I teach,
but it was just
so memorable. It was just a sort of memorable,
And your students' curiosity and
and it also sticks out because I'm like, oh, this would have been different now because someone would have texted me or we're so plugged in. Yeah.
What's your favorite unit to teach in world history?
Good question. I really enjoy the units in world history that have pretty direct connections to something that's happening in the world today. I very much enjoy teaching about China and Japan at the turn of the century, and sort of the how it sort of paves the way for what would happen later in the 20th century, but also insight into. I love helping students gain insight into nations that they know something about today, but as Americans, I think we don't really understand other cultures very well. It's not our fault as Americans. We tend to be just very focused on our own selves, and because we are the superpower we are, I like the units in the 20th century that can help students understand other nations' histories. So for example, helping students understand the humiliation that the Chinese government felt in the late 19th, early 20th century, and contrasting that to where China is today, but also seeing how that history is important in terms of how China views the world today.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely important for students to understand how what they're learning matches with what they see around them.
And helping make sense of the complicated world that we live in today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Did you always want to become a teacher, or if not, did you have something else that you originally wanted to be when you were growing up?
I used to want to be a therapeutic riding instructor, and I still kind of do want to be that. I kind of want to be that and a midwife. So maybe in my retirement, that's
those
what
are
I'll
retirement
do.
passions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, my mother was a elementary reading teacher, and she's long retired, but she still tutors and volunteers at our local school. So my mother is a teacher. My father was a historian by education. So I never really wanted to do what they did, but here I kind of ended up doing an amalgam of both. Yeah.
It's very cool.
I know there are people who say, like, oh, when I was a little kid, I used to pretend teach to, like, and set up my dolls and teach them. That wasn't ever I didn't envision myself necessarily as a teacher.
Interesting. But you're so good at what you do now.
Oh, well, thank you.
What has been, or is or was, the biggest challenge of being a teacher?
I think what makes it the most challenging is also what I love the most about it, and that is just that it's a people job. And I think that's why I've enjoyed teaching, and why I continue to enjoy teaching, is that it's very people intensive. But that can also be challenging because people are complicated, and being around people and talking to people constantly can also be tiring. And I think also what can be challenging is I also really love the subject matter that I teach about, and it's very important to me. So what makes that great is that I'm incredibly invested in it, or I like to think I am. And that can also be challenging because sometimes you're working with students who may or may not have the same passion for what you're teaching. But that's also what makes it exciting. And right now, I mean, in terms of challenges, I think the changes that we're experiencing with technology, with AI, I mean, I think in some ways the pace of change is challenging, just because it sometimes feels as though people my age inhabit a different sphere outside of here in terms of, like, online, on social media, than people your age. And so it can sometimes feel like that's changed quickly.
You are one of the advisors for the National Honor Society. What feels most rewarding about this position?
Oh, yeah, there's so much. I think working with students and getting to see what they do outside of here that I otherwise might not be aware of, because as teachers we have our 50 minutes or so a day with our students, and we get to know them well in a very limited context. So being able to be exposed to and talk with and work with students beyond that and see some of the great things they're doing. I mean, some of the service projects that students do are it's just incredible. And I also really find the tutoring that goes on in the school rewarding to be, I'm just a small part of that. The students really run it. But just to have a small role in that is rewarding.
Yeah, and the induction ceremony is tonight as well.
It is. Yeah.
Are you looking forward to it?
I am, yes.
Definitely. Many students here admire your daily fashion choices. Some people want to know what inspires your outfits.
This is a really cute question because I don't really have a good answer for it. I would say, I guess I have style, but I'm not really sure I have a sense of what that style is, and I don't really have any inspirations. I don't know.
Well, you look good every day.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. And no, it's funny because I don't really, I don't think of myself as someone who really pays a whole lot of attention to my appearance or my clothing choices. But
naturally it reflects.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. How did you discover your love for horses, and what are the names of all of your horses under your care right now?
So with my horses, this is actually a clear memory of mine too. So I grew up in Sherburne, as some people may know, and I grew up on Oldfield Drive. And we had best family friends that lived across the street. It's actually kind of funny. My father had grown up with their father in Rochester, New York, and we then lived across the street from each other in Sherburne. But anyways, my good friend across the street, he was taking riding lessons with a neighbor 2 houses down. And this was when I was 7 or something. And I went to see it because I could walk down the street, and it was sort of and it was like love at first sight. I just saw that and I'm like, I want to do that. And I remember I was a very scrawny little child, and my mother had some sort of like weight cutoff I had to make. I can't remember what the pounds were, but she's like, well, you can take a riding lesson when you hit X amount of weight. And so I ate a lot of food. And then it just was they say that people who get into horses, it's really something that it's kind of inexplicable. You just want to do it, you have to do it. And so I've done it ever since. And then you asked the names of my horses. Well, yeah, and that is why I live out in Central Mass, because I have all these animals there. So one of my main horses, her name is Desi. She's the one who was the product, she's the baby that was born as the result of the mom getting stuck. And I used to have her mom, but she passed away a year ago. So we've got Desi and Nix. Those are my two horses. And then my sister has a horse named Olivia. We've got a pony named Annie, a pony named Stormy, Benny. We have other couple of horses that aren't ours that we take care of. Soren, another Storm, and a little teeny pony named Finn.
Aw.
Yeah.
I love those names. Lastly, overall, what do you love most about teaching in general?
The people, the students. It's just the kind of job that doesn't get old. I mean, on the one hand, in some ways, I'm in the same classroom every day. I'm teaching very similar material every day. But the students are what make it so interesting and refreshing. And I learn a lot from my students. And I say that genuinely. It's something that really keeps the job exciting and alive for me, and it's also relevant. And it feels meaningful. And beyond that, I just work with wonderful teachers. So my colleagues keep it, aside. We all work with a group that's really dedicated and interested in their subject matter, and dedicated to helping students and working with students, and hopefully we share a little bit of that excitement for the learning that we have with them. So yeah, I mean, it's just, in some ways I think this is my 23rd year at DS, and it doesn't feel old, at all. And I think that's rare too. I mean, there aren't I think in most other fields, people change jobs. Like that's a much more typical job trajectory. And even people change jobs in teaching. But I mean, that's having been only at DS as a teacher, and then I was here as a student too. I have nothing to compare it to, but I'm always struck by how when teachers come here from other places, there's something about DS that's just special, and again,
sense of community that's built here.
Totally. And sometimes it's great to have a reminder of that, because you can forget, like I said, I have nothing to compare it to. But there's a new teacher this year, and I was asking them, well, how's it going? And they just said, this place is just, and this person had taught for the last couple of years and taught in a place that was good, and, they had been happy there. But they just said, like, this place is just incredible, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's just something really special, And I can put my finger on it. It's like we've got great students, we have really dedicated staff, wonderful administration, supportive parents,
Yeah.
Look at you here. You're taking your time at the end of the day to do this interview. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that I think speaks to the energy in the building.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next episode.